Have you ever wondered who you were before you were born? Not in a religious sense, not in a sense of reincarnation or past lives, but literally, who or what were you before this body, before this name, before this story? Most people never ask this question because the answer is too unsettling, too vast, too impossible to hold with the mind. But at 3 a.m, when the ego is quiet, when the masks have fallen, when you're completely alone in the darkness, this question can arise. Not as a thought, but as a sensation, as an opening in the fabric of reality that you spend your whole life avoiding looking at. Because if you really look, if you really allow this question to touch you, everything starts to fall apart. Not in a destructive way, but in a liberating way. Because you realize something that can't be undone. You realize that the person you think you are, with all your history, your wounds, your fears, your achievements, is just a temporary story, a performance, a role you're playing. And underneath that role, something that was never born. Something that will never die, something that was here before time and will be here after time folds in on itself. This isn't a video to help you sleep. This is a video to wake you up, not from sleep, but from the dream of being someone, from the dream of being separate, from the dream that you're a person navigating a strange universe. Let's talk about who you really are and why this truth, this impossible and absolute truth, is the only thing that can set you free. There's a central illusion that governs all human experience. It's so fundamental, so ingrained, so obvious that no one questions it. And it's this: I am this person. I was born on a specific date. I will die on a specific date. And between these 2 points, I have a life to live, problems to solve, goals to achieve. This story, this narrative of beginning and end, this feeling of being an isolated individual, separate from everything else. Your whole life has been built on this foundation. Every decision, every fear, every desire, everything comes from this fundamental belief: I am this. I am this body. I am this mind. I am this person. But what if it's not true? What if it's the biggest lie you've ever told yourself? Not because you're trying to deceive yourself, but because the human mind was designed to create this illusion. It was designed to draw a line around a part of experience and say, this is me. Everything else is not me. And this line, this artificial boundary between you and the world, between you and others, between you and life, is what creates all suffering. Because when you believe you're a separate individual, when you believe you're this temporary body, this unstable mind, this person with a history, you live in fear. fear of losing, fear of dying, fear of not being enough, fear of being forgotten. All this fear comes from one source: identification with what is temporary. But there's something in you that isn't temporary. There's something in you that was here before your first thought, before your first breath, before your first heartbeat. And this something impossible to name, impossible to describe, impossible to hold with concepts, isn't you in the sense of being a thing. It's you in the sense of being everything. Mystics have many names for this: consciousness, presence, being, the witness, the observer, the true self, God, Brahman, the Tao. But all these names are just fingers pointing to the moon. They're not the moon. And the moon, the real thing, the living truth, doesn't need a name, because it's what names. It's what sees all names arising and disappearing. And you're not the person you think you are. You're not the name on your ID. You're not the memories stored in your brain. You're not the body that ages. You're not the mind that changes. You are what observes all of this. You are the space within which all of this appears. You are the eternal, infinite, indestructible consciousness that watches the temporary play of forms.
And this consciousness was never born, because birth is something that happens to forms. And you're not form. You're what gives space for all forms to exist. I know this sounds abstract, philosophical, maybe even meaningless, because the mind can't understand this. The mind can only understand things, and you're not a thing. But you can feel it. At 3 a.m, when everything's quiet, when the person you think you are is temporarily suspended, you can feel there's something more, something vast, something that doesn't need the story to exist. If you feel this, if something here is echoing in a place beyond words, leave a comment. Just write, "I am." Not because I need to know, but because declaring this, even to yourself, even in an anonymous comment on the internet at 3 a.m, has power, has the ability to remind you of something you always knew but forgot. So let's go deeper. Let's look at what you really are, and what happens when you stop pretending to be just a person. You believe you were born. Of course you do. There's a certificate. There are photos. There are people who remember the day. There's overwhelming evidence that on a specific date, you came into existence. But let's examine this more closely. What really was born? A body was born. Cells divided. Organs formed. A baby emerged. And that baby was given a name. And that name was given a story. And that story became you. But where are you in this story? Where specifically are you located? Are you in the body? In the brain? In some specific region of the brain? In memory? In thoughts? Science has been searching for decades, searching for the I, searching for consciousness, searching for what makes you be you. And you know what it found? Nothing. Literally nothing. There's no command center. There's no little man inside the brain making decisions. There's no specific place where you live. There are only processes, neurons firing, thoughts arising, sensations appearing, but no central doer, no I that can be located, measured, pointed to. So what really was born? An organism was born. A pattern of energy organized itself in a specific way. But consciousness, the consciousness that's reading these words now, that's hearing this voice, that's aware of being aware, this consciousness wasn't born because consciousness isn't created. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain like the liver produces bile. Consciousness is the field within which brains, livers, bodies, entire worlds appear.
And this story has a birth date. This story started at some point. This story will end at some point. But the consciousness that allows this story to exist, this consciousness has no beginning, no end. Because consciousness isn't something that happens in time. Consciousness is what makes time possible. Consciousness is the space within which past, present, and future appear. So what was born wasn't you. What was born was a body. What was born was a person. What was born was a story called I. But you, the real you were never born because you're not a thing that can be born. You're the eternal space within which all things are born and die. And this isn't theory. This isn't philosophy. This is your direct experience now, in this moment.
Think about this. Think about your first memory, your first conscious memory of being you. Maybe you were 3, 4, 5 years old. Before that, nothing, darkness, emptiness. But you existed before that memory. You were a baby. You were a small child. And there was consciousness there. Maybe not self-reflective consciousness. Maybe not consciousness that said, I am. But there was experience. There was perception. There was being here. So where was you? You, the I that you think you are, with your memories, your history, your identity. It didn't exist. But consciousness existed, experience existed, being here existed. And if you're honest, if you really look at your experience now, that same quality is present. There's being here, there's consciousness, there's this moment appearing, and this consciousness, this being here, this moment, has no age, no history, no birth certificate. It simply is. And isn't born, is never began, is always was, and always will be.
So, if you're not the person, if you're not the body, if you're not the story, who are you? The simplest answer: you are what is aware. Not the content of consciousness, but consciousness itself. Not the thoughts, but what perceives thoughts. Not the sensations, but what feels sensations. Not the experiences, but what experiences. The ancient Vedantins had a term for this. Sakshi, the witness, the observer, the one who sees everything but is touched by nothing. And this is what you are.
You are the silent witness of everything that happens. You always have been. You always will be. Think about your life. Think about all the changes. You were a baby. You were a child. You were a teenager. You're an adult now. And if you live long enough, you'll be elderly. The body changed completely. Every cell that made up your body when you were 5 is dead now, replaced. You're literally a different body. The mind changed. Your beliefs changed. Your preferences changed. Your opinions changed. The person you were at 10 thought completely different things from the person you are now. Relationships changed. Some began, some ended. People entered your life, people left. Circumstances changed. Where you live, what you do, who you know. Everything changed. Everything is in constant flux. Nothing remains the same. But you're still here. Not you as a person, but you as consciousness. You as the witness. You as the one who was present for all these changes. Close your eyes for a moment, just for a second, and notice there's being aware. There's consciousness. There's this moment being experienced. And this consciousness, this being aware, is the same consciousness that was present when you were 5 years old. It's the same consciousness that was present when you had your first kiss. It's the same consciousness that was present in your greatest joy and your greatest pain. Consciousness didn't age. Consciousness didn't change. Consciousness wasn't affected by any of the events in your life. It just witnessed, silently, constantly, without judgment, without preference. And this is what you are. Not what was witnessed, but the witness itself. And the witness has no history. The witness has no wounds. The witness has no fears, because the witness isn't affected by what it witnesses. The movie screen isn't affected by the films that play on it. The screen isn't cut when there's a violent scene. The screen doesn't fall in love when there's a romance scene. The screen remains screen, unchanged, untouched, pure. And you are the screen. Not the movie, not the characters, not the story. You are the space within which everything happens. And this might seem cold. It might seem distant. It might seem that if you're just the witness, then nothing matters. Then you can't really live, can't really love, can't really care. But it's the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. Because when you realize you're the witness, when you stop identifying with the character and the story, you finally can live completely, totally, without fear, because you have nothing left to lose. The character can lose, the body can be hurt, the mind can suffer, but you, the eternal witness, can never be touched. And this realization doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you free. Free to love without fear of loss. Free to live without fear of death. Free to experience everything with absolute intensity, because you know, not as belief, but as direct knowledge that you're indestructible. So, who are you? You're the silent witness, the eternal consciousness, the space within which all of life happens. You were never born because you're not a thing that can be born. You will never die because you're not a thing that can die. You always were. You always will be. Not as a person, but as presence, as consciousness, as the eye through which the universe sees itself. So, if you were never born, what happens when you die? The person dies. The body dies. The story ends. There's no doubt about that. This specific form, this particular organization of energy called you, will dissolve, will return to the elements, will transform into something else. But consciousness? Consciousness doesn't die. Because consciousness isn't produced by form, consciousness is what allows forms to exist. Think about a TV. When you turn off the TV, the programs disappear. The characters disappear. The stories end. But the electromagnetic field that was transmitting those programs, that field doesn't disappear. It continues. It's just no longer being received by that specific receiver.
And I know this is a limited analogy, but it's the closest language can get. Because what I'm trying to point to is beyond language, beyond concepts, beyond everything the mind can hold. But you can feel it. You can feel it now. There's being here. There's consciousness. And this consciousness doesn't feel like it's produced by the body. It feels like the body is appearing in it. So what happens when the body dies? The form changes. The story ends. The character exits the stage. But the stage remains. The space within which the character appeared, that space goes nowhere. Because that space isn't located. That space isn't inside the body. The body is inside that space. And this isn't reincarnation. It's not the idea that you will come back as another person, because there's no you to come back. There's only consciousness. And consciousness has no form, no identity, no preference for one body over another. Consciousness is what animates all bodies, all beings, all forms, not as a separate entity entering forms, but as the single field within which all forms appear. It's like the ocean and the waves. Each wave has a form. Each wave has a peak. Each wave has a beginning and an end. And when the wave breaks, it dies. The form disappears. But the water doesn't disappear. The water simply reorganizes, becomes another wave, or returns to the vastness of the ocean. And the ocean never lost anything. The ocean never gained anything. The ocean just is, eternally, infinitely. You are the ocean,
not the wave. The wave is the person. The wave is the body. The wave is the story. And yes, the wave will break. The wave will die. But you were never just the wave. You were always the ocean expressing itself as a wave for a moment. And when the wave goes, the ocean remains, undisturbed, unchanged, eternal. And I know this might not bring comfort if you're afraid of death, if you're holding someone who's dying, if you're mourning someone who's already gone. Because the person you love, the person you are, the person who's dying, that person is real. That story is real. That form is real. And the loss of that form hurts. It should hurt. But underneath the pain, underneath the grief, underneath the fear, there's something that can't be lost, something that can't be destroyed, something that was here before that person was born and will be here after that person is gone. And recognizing this doesn't mean not caring, doesn't mean not suffering. It means suffering with wisdom. It means grieving with the understanding that form changes, but essence never dies. Death is just changing channels. Consciousness goes nowhere, because consciousness isn't something that moves. Consciousness is the space within which all movement happens. And you are this consciousness. You always were. You always will be. Immortal. Eternal. Infinite. Not as ego, but as essence, as presence, as the silent eye through which all of life flows. So if you're eternal, if you were never born and will never die, how do you live? How do you move through this temporary world when you know you're not temporary? The answer isn't to withdraw. It's not to become indifferent. It's not to float above life like a ghost, untouched, uninvolved. The answer is the opposite. It's to dive completely. It's to live completely. It's to experience everything with maximum intensity. Because when you know you can't be destroyed, when you know the worst that can happen is a form changes, you have nothing left to defend. Nothing to protect, nothing to preserve. You can love without fear of loss, because you know what you really love isn't the form. It's the consciousness animating the form, and that consciousness never leaves. You can create without fear of failing, because you know failure is just a form changing, and forms are made to change. You can take risks without fear of losing yourself, because you know you can't lose yourself. You are the space within which lost and found appear. Living as the eternal doesn't mean denying the temporary. It means embracing the temporary completely, precisely because you know it's temporary. It's like watching a movie. When you know it's a movie, when you know it's not real in the literal sense, you can surrender completely to the story. You can laugh, you can cry, you can be moved, because you know when the movie ends, you'll still be here.
But most people don't watch life like a movie. They live as if it's real in the absolute sense. as if the story is everything, as if when the movie ends, they'll end too. And so they live in fear. Fear the story will go wrong, fear the character will suffer, fear the movie will end too soon. And this fear makes it impossible to really live, because you're so busy trying to control the story, trying to guarantee a happy ending, trying to preserve the character, that you never really experience life. You never really feel. You never really are here. So when you really know you're not the character, that you're the consciousness watching the movie, everything changes. You can let the character live completely. You can let the character love, suffer, rejoice, despair. You can let the story unfold as it will unfold, because you know that whatever happens to the character, you, the witness, the consciousness, the eternal, remain untouched. If this is starting to make sense, not just intellectually but viscerally, as a knowing in your body, share this. Send it to someone who's afraid, someone who's holding on too tight, someone who needs to remember they're more than their story. Because this knowledge, this recognition of what we really are, isn't just for us. It's something that naturally wants to be shared. Because when you see you're the eternal, you also see everyone is. You see the beggar on the street is the same consciousness. You see your enemy is the same consciousness. You see everything, absolutely everything, is this one consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. And then how can you hate? How can you judge? How can you see yourself as separate? You can't, because you've seen through the illusion of separation. And once you see, you can't unsee. So how do you live as the eternal? You live completely present. Because when you're eternal, you don't need the future anymore. You don't need tomorrow to save you. You don't need someday to be happy. You can be everything now. Because now is the only thing that exists. Past is memory appearing now. Future is imagination appearing now. Everything is happening now. And now is where the eternal lives. You live with deep compassion, because when you see your eternal consciousness, you also see everyone is. You see the beggar on the street is the same consciousness. You see your enemy is the same consciousness. You see everything, absolutely everything, is this one consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. And then how can you hate? How can you judge? How can you see yourself as separate? You can't, because you've seen through the illusion of separation. And once you see, you can't unsee. And once you've seen that you are consciousness, not a person who believes in a timeline, how can you live anymore? You live with intense gratitude. Because when you know you're eternal, when you know you can't lose anything real, everything becomes gift. Everything becomes bonus. Everything becomes grace. This body, gift. This moment, gift. This breath, gift. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is owed. Everything is given. And then each moment becomes sacred, not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you've finally seen what was always here. The eternal, manifesting as temporal. The infinite playing at being finite, just to rediscover its infinite nature. Living as the eternal is the most practical thing you can do, because it frees you from the fear that paralyzes, frees you from the need that suffocates, frees you from the search that never ends. And in your freedom, you can finally live, really live, not as someone trying to survive, but as eternal consciousness playing in temporary form. And this play, this dance, this divine game of hide and seek where the infinite pretends to be finite just to rediscover its infinite nature. This is what you are. This is what you always were. This is what you can never stop being. So here we are at 3 a.m. Or maybe later, maybe earlier. But here, in this moment, there's an opportunity to recognize something you always knew but forgot. Something that was buried under layers of conditioning, of history, of identification with form. You're not who you think you are. Not because you're wrong about the facts. Your name is real. Your history is real. Your body is real. But you're not these things. You are what's aware of these things. And this recognition, this simple but profound recognition that you are consciousness, not form, isn't achievement. It's not something you do. It's something you notice. It's like those drawings where you look for a while and suddenly see two images. You saw the vase your whole life, and then in a moment you see the two faces, and now you can't unsee. You'll always see both. This is awakening. Not a special state, not a mystical experience. Just seeing what was always here. Seeing that you are the space, not the content. The screen, not the movie. The consciousness, not the person.
And once you see, once you really see, everything changes. Not because the world changes, but because your relationship with the world changes. You stop living as if you're at life's mercy, because you realize you are life. You stop living in fear that something will destroy you, because you realize you can't be destroyed. You stop seeking for something to complete you, because you realize you were always complete. You stop waiting for a better future, because you realize eternity is now. And this doesn't mean problems disappear, doesn't mean pain disappears, doesn't mean you float above human life in perpetual bliss. The character continues, the story continues, challenges come, pain comes, but you're no longer lost in the story. You're watching the story, participating in the story, but not defined by the story. It's like waking from a nightmare. The nightmare seemed absolutely real. The fear was genuine. The danger was convincing. But then you wake up and realize, I was dreaming. None of that was real in the way I thought. And you feel relief. Not because the images of the nightmare disappeared from memory, but because you know now they were just images, just forms passing through consciousness. This life, This life you're living now is exactly like this. It's real, but it's not real in the way you thought. It's a dream, a divine dream, a dream that consciousness is having. And you're not the character in the dream. You're the dreamer. You're the consciousness dreaming all of this into existence. And recognizing this doesn't make you less human. It makes you more human. Because now you can be human completely without fear, can feel completely without resistance, can live completely without holding back. Because you know the human is temporary, and the temporary is precious precisely because it's temporary. The flower is beautiful because it will wilt. The sunset is magical because it will disappear. Life is sacred because it will end. But you who are aware of the flower, the sunset, the life, you don't end. You don't begin. You don't change. You are the eternal witnessing the temporal. You are the infinite playing at being finite. You are the immortal experiencing mortality. And this isn't belief. It's not philosophy. It's not spiritual theory. This is your direct experience now. Stop for a moment. Just stop and notice there's being here. There's consciousness. There's this moment being experienced. And this consciousness, this being here, has no age, no history, no form, no limits. It's the same now as it was when you were 5. It's the same now as it will be when your body is 80. It's the same now as it was before this body was born. It's the same now as it will be after this body dies. You were never born. You will never die. You are the eternal witness of all that is born and dies. And this recognition, this simple recognition, is the only real freedom. Because when you know you can't be destroyed, you can finally stop defending yourself. When you know you can't lose anything real, you can finally stop holding on. When you know you're eternal, you can finally live fully in the temporary. So who are you? You are the space within which everything happens. You are the consciousness that allows entire worlds to exist. You are the silence that hears all sounds. You are the darkness that makes light possible. You are the emptiness that's full of everything. You were never born. You will never die. You always were. You always will be. Not as a person, not as a body, not as a mind, but as presence, as consciousness, as the eternal now. And this is what you always knew but forgot. It's what every mystic points to. It's what every master whispers. It's what every moment of stillness reveals. You are simply, absolutely, eternally. I am.
If you are here now, if you made it to the end of this conversation, this transmission in the darkness of the early morning, something in you recognized the truth in this. Not conceptual truth, not intellectual truth, but living truth. The truth that you are. And I know that when the video ends, when you return to your life, when the day begins and distractions return, this clarity might seem distant. This perception might seem like it was just a moment, a glimpse, something you touched but couldn't hold. And that's okay, because you don't need to hold. You don't need to maintain this state. You don't need to become permanently enlightened. You just need to remember, now and then, especially in the darkest moments, in the moments of greatest fear, in the moments when you feel most lost. You need to remember you can't be lost, because you're not something that can be lost. You are the space within which lost and found appear. And you were never born. You will never die. And between these two non-events, there's this life, this precious, temporary, absolutely sacred life. And you can live it as a victim, as someone who was thrown into a hostile universe without choice, without power, without meaning. Or you can live it as consciousness, as the eternal playing at being temporal, as the infinite experiencing finitude, as God, if that word resonates, forgetting itself just to have the joy of remembering again. And this isn't a choice you make once. It's a choice you make moment to moment. It's a constant remembering. It's a perpetual returning to the truth of who you are. Because identification with the person is strong. Identification with the story is convincing. Identification with the body is automatic. And so you forget, and forget again, and forget 1,000 times. And each time you forget, you suffer, because you believe again you're vulnerable, you're separate, you can be destroyed. And then something reminds you. Maybe it's a moment of beauty. Maybe it's a moment of loss. Maybe it's at 3 a.m. when everything is quiet and you're confronted with the mystery of simply being here. And in that moment, you remember. You remember you're not the frightened person. You're the consciousness that's aware of the fear. You remember you're not the story. You're the space within which all stories unfold. You remember you're not temporal, you're eternal, manifesting as temporal. And in that remembering, there's peace. Not the peace of having solved everything, not the peace of having all the answers, but the peace of knowing you're okay, that you always were okay, that you never weren't okay, because you can't not be okay. You are the consciousness within which okay and not okay appear. And this consciousness isn't affected by any state. It just witnesses, eternally, silently, lovingly. So this is what I invite you to do. Not as duty, not as spiritual practice, but as a gentle returning. Whenever you remember, stop, breathe, and ask yourself, who is aware of this? Who is aware of the fear? Who is aware of the pain? Who is aware of the confusion? And in that asking, in that looking, you'll find something that has no name, something vast, something that was always here, something that is you, but not the you you thought you were. And then let go. Let go of the need to understand. Let go of the need to hold. Let go of the need to be someone. And simply be, as you always were, as you never stopped being. If this touched something in you that can't be named, if this awakened a recognition that was sleeping, share it. Not because you need to convince anyone, but because when you see the truth, there's a natural joy in pointing to it, in whispering to others, look, you too are this. And maybe someone you love, someone who's suffering, someone who's forgotten who they really are, maybe they need to hear this. Maybe it's exactly what they need to remember. And if you want more of these transmissions, more of these reminders in the darkness of the early morning, subscribe. Turn on notifications, because these videos exist for one reason: to remember, to point, to whisper the truth we all know, but constantly forget. You were never born. You will never die. You are eternal. You are infinite. You are free. And this isn't a promise for the future. This is what you are now. Always were, always will be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering, even if just for a moment, who you really are. You are eternal consciousness, witnessing all of this. You always were, you always will be. And this is enough. This is everything. This is absolute freedom. See you at 3 a.m, or rather, see you in the eternal now, which is the only place we ever meet.